an Apex Lab podcast. Hey there, welcome to the Level Up Engineering Podcast, where we speak to the most experienced technology leaders from around the world. So stay with us to learn actionable management insights to take your engineering team to the next level. This show is powered by Apex Lab, a team of experts in end-to-end digital product development. ApexLab.io.
Welcome to the Level Up Engineering Podcast, everyone. I am Carolina Toth, your host, and I talk with very accomplished software engineering leaders every other week. Today, I have another accomplished guest who is Senior Director of Software Engineering at Salesforce. Mayakrishnan Chakkarapani is here with us to talk about Agile in big corporations. But before we jump into today's topic, please, MC, introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners. What should we know about you?
Thank you, Carolina. It's a great opportunity to be here. I am Mayakrishnan Chakkarapani. I go by MC. So essentially, I am basically have a great execution focus all along in my life because my parents are all have always a laundry list of things to do and always find a ways to efficiently execute all of them because that's kind of how I brought up from my family. So I always have this the focus of, okay, how do I execute this efficiently? So that's kind of how I evolved. And then when one of the reasons I picked software engineering is because of the excitement of all these new things and great things we can do, right? And how I can make this as part of my process into my software engineering development. So when I started my career in the software industry, starting in the product development, I worked on various companies on fintech, government cloud, and then also recently on Salesforce on the public cloud journey. All of this 20 plus years, one thing is common is the expectations and outcomes are continuously increasing, right? And one thing that always stuck with me is how do I execute as a leader, and how the teams are positioned to execution is always stuck with me. So that's why I went through all this transformation changes from going from waterfall, rapid application development, Agile, and now I call Agile 3D, which we'll talk about later in the session. Some of the things that we have to continually improve and incrementally show the value and whatnot, and how we can take that from X to 3 or 10X that the current need of our industry, right? That's how we're going to sustain in this current tough market. So overall, that's kind of my journey is how do we evolve as a process, and then also some of the modifications to Agile, which we can talk about as well, is what I'm very interested to share with our audience today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Before we dive into that, you've been with Salesforce for quite a while. Have they always used agile methodologies when you've been with them, or have you kind of seen a transformation within the organization?
At least within my organization, when I joined 7 years back at Salesforce, we started with Agile for sure, but I will not say that all the organizations within Salesforce was using. We are not an Agile organization. We are trending to be an Agile, right? Basically, start with Scrum, right? That doesn't make you Agile by default, right? It's just one of the implementing methodology, right? So, for example, even in my teams, we started with 4 to 6 weeks kind of planning time, and then we deliver products. Even though we say 6 weeks, but eventually went up actually 2 weeks, 2 months, and so on, right? So that's how Agile journey started for me in Salesforce. And even if you look at overall as a product, Salesforce, right? Even though we want to be Agile and then get to 2 weeks, but just face the reality of it, right? Salesforce product is being widely used across various countries, and CRM is number one in Salesforce, right? So that product customers, when we try to churn faster, some organizations, especially on the customer organizations, they don't have a need to go that fast because they have a whole lot of process built around Salesforce. They need a lot of time to test and observe the change. So there is some feedback we also got as well is to, hey, do it in a little more longer cadence, but in a predictable cadence. So that's why Salesforce did what we call a hybrid way of thinking about Agile, right? We still have 3 releases, major releases in a year, but organization level, we still continually strive to incrementally deliver value in a much more cadence from 6 weeks to 2 weeks, right? That's what actually now organization wide we changed, but still continually deliver the value to build up to that major release of that 4-month cycle. So that's how where we started. Now everywhere the organization we standardized the 2-week cadence, and also every organization within Salesforce also have this 4-month planning that we call 2RR, right? To release readout, right? So we really plan ahead, but at the same time we incrementally deliver value. So that's how we kind of balancing our customer expectations, but still not compromising our internal agility, if that makes sense.
Thank you. And broadening the picture a little bit, Agile has been around for a while, and sort of a lot of companies have their own spin of the Agile manifesto, and a lot of people will say they work in a semi-agile environment. What's your take on that? What do you think is the state of Agile software development today?
I think Agile has been almost 20 plus years now, right? I think one thing I've seen a common pattern across organizations, not just within Salesforce, my previous company in Intuit and everybody, right? Everybody wants predictable, repeatable customer outcome as part of this process, right? In my opinion, Agile is just a process, means to get to it, right? And what Agile does not, in my opinion, will solve, which eventually every organization will have to figure out to be an Agile organization, is that there is a lot of culture, right? Culture aspects is not Agile going to teach you, right? For example, if culturally, if everybody is not aligned to be in a 2-week cadence or even continuously delivering value, if that's culturally you evolve, it is very hard going to go and force Scrum and Agile on the organization, at least initially, right? Till everybody mindset changes. So the first thing we are learning actually as organizations across industry is that your culture is very important. So first you have to start from changing that organization mindsets into why we need to solve Agile way. Why can't we just do what we do, or a hybrid model that works very well in some cases, right? So culture is a big one, in my opinion, that needs to first happen. And that is what actually industries are, in my opinion, they are very better at now. So they're modifying based on the culture. I'll give you a specific example, right? So in Salesforce, when we started, the same thing, right? Everybody said, "Oh, go do Agile," right? And what happened is every team started doing 2 weeks Agile and started churning faster. And what happened is, fundamentally, Salesforce is a very engineering organization, even though it's a sales organization, sales by nature. But we have built a fantastic engineering culture. And when we adopted Agile, there is this loss of culture of, we have to go fast, right? We have to deliver everything fast. So we were a little bit blindsided on the fact that in some teams, that vision and everything is taken a little of spin off and just focus on getting Agile and getting out for the customer. So in my opinion, that kind of cultural shift without understanding why is a problematic. So that's why I think we started fixing them and saying, okay, you cannot compromise on your product vision. You cannot compromise on architectural soundness, and you have to do all these things right and define them upfront, right? And then we adopt Agile and then say, how do we break this down in a more, what our leader called is tactically, continually deliver to get that strategy at the end, right? So that's kind of how I see, at least within Salesforce, we evolving and becoming an Agile organization without compromising culture, right? So that means every organization have to find themselves what is that sweet spot without compromising what make them success in first place. So that Agile is not necessarily a panacea, but it's more of a process that helps to get even faster with the same culture of values intact.
So could we safely say that really creating outcomes for the customers is the main goal, and you don't even necessarily need to use Agile software development if you want to do that, but you consciously decided that Agile would be the best for your organization?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I strongly believe agile methodologies, they are really grounded by a lot of learnings by trying different other methodologies that existed in the software, in the early stages of software development, right? I personally feel agile is still practical. It's very pragmatic, right? Still keeping your customer focused, right? That's the first important thing. And then the other business needs are continuously evolving changes, right? For example, when we do a release planning, right, we basically plan for all the things that customer asks for as of that moment, right? And then you already know the reality of it is there's always going to be something coming up as a high priority or a mandate or some security issue came up, then we need to go and address them as a critical point and so on. So there's always going to be a spin on your release cadence, whether it's at sprint level impact or the release level impact, right? So changes is always going to be an interesting thing that Agile always makes you harbor that first, right? I think Salesforce, given that there is a lot of stakeholders in terms of marketing and sales, they always learning continually in the field from customers what product makes sense and what does not. So there's continuous feedback loop coming from the product as well back into our backlog. So there's always have to build a mindset of change is constant, and any organization does not adapt faster is always going to be not able to sustain in this competitive market. So Salesforce always step ahead in making sure that this change is continuously constant. So the way we adapt that is actually we in our backlog blooming, we continually ask what is our the top priority for this particular sprint, and if anything new come up, and then we evaluate against all our backlog and say where this fits in, right? And if there's highest priority, if it fit in, we have to drop something that we committed. And that is where I think more than agile, right? There's also, I keep insisting on the culture, right? For example, the way Salesforce culture bubbles up any changes, right? Not just agile gives you a tooling, great, but how do you communicate to your stakeholders and make sure there's alignment when you drop something from what has already been committed, right? So that's why we have some toolings like V2MOM, and which is basically stands for all your values, right? And then methods, operations, and measures. Basically, it's basically a tool that communicates all stakeholders, hey, this particular thing getting dropped and this particular getting added, and understanding the business justification and all this information is a tooling which pretty widely shared from CEO at the start of the year all the way to trickling down to the individual engineer. Performance are evaluated based on this V2MOM goals, and then how we are achieving against it. So that's a perfect vehicle we have as a culture where Agile helps to give you the way to adapt, and then there's a tooling to communicate to all the stakeholders so that we continuously align with all our stakeholders, which is also very important to keep. It's one of the Agile things is also keep all your stakeholders in intact, right? So that's how I see this all manifesting, and then making sure the culture helps being intact any process you follow.
Thank you for the clarification. I would also imagine that I don't want to blame our listeners. I think it's me. I think that huge corporations are sometimes prone to not really empowering their employees, and my understanding is that a huge part of agile software development is the empowerment of the people who are delivering the software. And right. My question is, how do you keep your engineers empowered in such a large organizations? What are some steps that you can share with our audience?
Yeah. I think now it's a great question. Actually, now we kind of transforming into some modifications we do Salesforce, predominantly starting with my organization, right? One of them is empowerment. Is heart of things. We strongly believe we value high performing organization, right? And then we also value high performance engineers, right? Now, Agile Manifesto says that, okay, the best team out there is actually a self-forming team, a self-empowered team, right? But that's on paper. But how do you practically get there, right? For example, you may have a team. I have a team where there are some top performers. You just give them a hint, and then they will put up and they lay out the entire sticks and roads and everything they build for you, right? Amazing. And there are engineers that I call a rock star engineers or solid engineers, right? You give them, and then they ask clarifying questions, and then they will do a best job what you can do out of it, right? but they will not do more, but they will not do less, but they just do perfect. And there's some engineers who still trying to figure out what is this all about, right? They're still figuring out the minds where it is in the part of software development, and also still not acclimatized fully with the culture of Salesforce, how we operate. Sometimes it's lost. After COVID, it's very hard on them, especially on onboarding. Our CEO told multiple times it's a little bit hard time for newcomers because they don't have FaceTime for most of the first few years. So they're still catching up on that. Now things are changing, but still. So you can see the spectrum of engineering thing. Now, how do you go and tell them, hey, go engineers and go be a self-empowered team, and then you can do whatever you want. Here's a backlog of things and go deliver, right? There is some madness there, right? If you do that, right? So that is where I feel like there is modifications we have to make that is more pragmatic, what I call 3D, so Agile 3D, right? It's basically a data-driven development. Data could be coming from different stakeholders. And the most important stakeholder, in my opinion, of course, there is, of course, customers, right? And then also what I call the sideways partners, right? Who are telling you what I can do, what I can't do. And the most important thing is come within the Scrum is our engineers, right? Engineers telling, as part of the process, what is working, what is needed more work, right? I don't really call anymore not working because that puts a negative spin. So what is needed more work is a kind of small change that helps engineers to get a lot of feedback loop out of it, right? So some of the modifications using this data and then circulating back into our process and make some small tweaks. I'll give you a very specific example so that you understand where I'm going with this. Let's say one of the engineers is struggling, and as a manager, I have one-on-one with an engineer, and then the engineer tells me, hey, I have some personal things going on in my life, right? And the next quarter or so, I really want to be, even though I've been a top performer, I really want to be more of a solid engineer who really want to do just the thing that has been given to me, just totally, in my opinion, it's totally okay. Because in my opinion, I'm a big fan of work-life balance, and Agile is also encouraging that, right, without burnouts, right? So question is, knowing that context, and Agile Manifesto does not have a clear role of manager anywhere in this process, right? So you're a chicken, technically, right? So how do you empower knowing that information, because you also have a self-governing team? How do you bring this data point in a way that it does not reveal the personal problems of the engineer, but still empower that engineer to be his best? So some of the modifications, what we have done is, so in our infrastructure world, right, managers also luckily play a product owner role, right? So you can bring in some of this dimension of not only you're being a product and listing out what are some of the things that the priority wise, right? But at the same time, you also inquisitively inquiring the teams and say, who is best can take this story? Right? Simply asking that question, who is the best can take the story? And then understand from each engineers, like if the high performers always take that story, now he's not going to take the story because that's very complicated, right? And then that asking the question sometimes raises other people to say, hey, I want to get this because I want to stretch myself. And there's some engineers who also have that information of, I want to stretch goal, right? So those are some ways in which you bring that information and you ask right questions during the planning and influence the right engineers who wants to take that opportunity. The self-governing teams, that information is missing, so there will be constant friction why this is not being taken by this engineer, why I always have to take this engineer, right? So in my opinion, this combination of empowering but bringing the data point to the team back, and that is one way, right? One of the ways we do it, just to give an example. But other ways are actually, in my opinion, that worked in our Salesforce organizations are we empower engineers to rotate periodically. What I mean by that is, if an engineer has built enough expertise in particular area, again, knowing that engineer getting boredom, right? We don't want to avoid that. We'll lose the engineer if you don't continually challenge them. So knowing that kind of insights also helps to ask new projects to be assigned to one of the senior most engineers who already been done excellent work, and then he wants to learn new areas. So providing that kind of opportunities through Scrum and doing the planning, that kind of helps people to use that mechanism to empower them. So just this is a kind of few small changes we make, which is not necessarily prescribed in Agile in a self-governing team, but giving that input that is as a different role can provide is actually a feedback loop. It's still a data-driven decision making. So that's how empowerment happens in some of the organizations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. May I ask you, how big is the organization that you lead?
So I have about 20 engineers reporting, and I also manage a lot of virtual teams, which I'll come to the next one. In a bigger organization, you cannot just have a team for every project you have. There are times where high priority come in, no resources to be existing. So we also manage a virtual team of another 20 to 25 people. Mm-hmm. It's completely not part of the organization chart, but you also manage some high critical items with no resource, but still move forward for the next year. What I call scrappy products that you want to get out of it, so that you can learn quickly and then you can make a business out of next year.
I would ask you about the growth of the organization or the size of the organization that you lead, because what you have described, I think, requires a lot of very conscious communications. And I would imagine that in a larger organization, this could be quite a challenge. What would you say to that?
I think I call it as like a more of an equilateral triangle, right? 3 stakeholders you need to continuously balance, whether it's one of the, how you manage up, right? So basically all your product and your engineering leader organization who have certain vision and how you want to execute them, right? And also your partners who also needs to work to come together and help deliver that. And then of course, the next one is of course our engineering teams who needs to deliver that, right? I think in my opinion, as I said, the biggest challenge has always been is priorities. What we think as an organization as a priority may not be the right alignment across different organizations. For example, engineering may say the high priority for us is to get this new product out for the customers, right? Because it has a 1 or 2 billion attached ACV. So it's very important according to sales and marketing. So we're going to execute this product. And security goes and says, oh, that's have quite a bit of risk in terms of security shapes. Because now we need to get into China and there's a lot more guardrails and whatnot, right? So there's a lot more time needed. So I am aligned on priority, but my first priority is to do some of this security shapes and understanding and executing them. So then one day I can allow engineering to move forward. So now you can see, even though we are aligned, but as a bigger organization, they have different priorities and different risks they have to manage, right? So what do I say for that kind of situation is actually, this is where I think that is where the vehicles or toolings that exist in the company that we can leverage. I think I keep repeating is a V2 MOM, right? One of the fantastic vehicles we have in Salesforce is to continually say, okay, so these are the risks we call out and say, hey, security have different priorities and they have to do those first before we can actually execute much faster. So the timelines that we originally communicated may not align. Now, question then is, okay, so you take this information, you bubble it up in your V2 MOM, and then you bring it to the forum to have this, to the engineering forum where you bring in this information. Of course, we don't go in there. We talk to each organization and align and say, what can you do? So is a resourcing issue that you have to go practice. That's great. So do you have a resource to do it? Most of the time, what happens is either it's a resourcing problem or it's a technological discovery problem, right? Or third is somewhere combination of both, right? Yes, some of them here, some of them there. So what I normally do is if it is a resourcing problem, right? This is where I think we bring in a concept called virtual teams, right? So who in other organizations, maybe these 2 organizations have a conflict and they don't have resourcing, where can we bring some additional resources who have those skill sets and who can actually contribute to bring that particular risk mitigated, right? So sometimes we have to form a virtual team, or sometimes we're going to form a SWAT team and say, what are the biggest risks in getting the security shape figured out? So we will form a SWAT team. First, the charter is to go and mitigate that risk by rigorously working towards that whatever the set goals that needs to be done. and execute towards that, right? And that's how what we have done is we extended this concept of Scrum into empowering into more targeted towards business outcome, right? And then bring the like-minded people and focus on get that unresolved. Now, this may cross boundaries, right? It's not even in particular organization. We could bring some virtual teams. And you may ask how we form that. I think this is where our engineering leaders are well aware of where are the opportunities where some organizations have some resource buffer, which may not relate directly to this project, but they bring in that kind of information. And that worked out very well for us to continually innovate, not stopping the business outcome. So that's one way I feel this can be achieved.
That seems like a really amazing way of organizing your teams. So are engineers interchangeable within the sort of projects because of what you mentioned of giving them newer and newer challenges, so that at the end, maybe like most people are capable of working on different projects?
Yeah, I think we that's a great question, to be honest, because there is projects, virtual teams are very successful. I admit some of them or most of them also not that's great. Let's put that way, right? But one thing I always felt like projects that are successful, I always look for learnings and then how do we take that learning and iterate, right? So the projects that are virtual teams are very successful. I'll give you a specific example. So we have to build this, what we call product governance. In other words, when in my organization infrastructure, a lot of Salesforce products will have a charter and say, hey, I want to move to public cloud. I'm in first party, now I need to move to public cloud. Now, some of these products are very complicated. They have a lot of different architectural patterns evolved over the years. Moving them all in public cloud journey into our common architecture strategy is not an easy thing to do, right? As we go through this journey with the individual products, what we quickly learned is, that does not work in the platform. And that means you have to unblock me. Otherwise, I cannot continue with my journey. So that kind of things pop up as a top priority all the time, right? To solve that, I have, as a platform team, I have understanding of my platform, but I don't have understanding of your product, how your architecture evolved. And if I propose some change, I don't know how it will impact you, right? So quickly you can see there is a virtual team by organically how to form between the product engineers and our platform engineers, and then maybe some security folks who needs to approve this new architectural changes, right? So you can see that quickly. It's not like substitute any engineer for anything, right? I'm not preaching that. Knowing that myself, that is going to be a disaster, right? So you bring in the right like-minded people, all have same goal in mind. We need to get this product to the public cloud quicker, so that our customers can quickly get a bigger footprint in other European zones and other zones they want to go for, right? So that is how I bring in the virtual teams. That brings the context very clearly, saying, okay, now we need to form a virtual team that platform engineers, product engineers, and security engineers, and who knows, maybe other engineers bring in and quickly unblock and say, how do I make some small changes in the platform? How do I make some changes into the product? And then maybe sometimes we need to cross-pollinate, and then we do end-to-end testing and make sure that this doesn't break anything else, right? So that is how the virtual teams quickly form, deliver that important problem, and then go back and then proceed with the other things that they normally do. And these teams can range from anywhere from few weeks to up to a year or even more than a year. I've seen some teams where we virtually formed, they love the product so much, and then they really made a product out of it, and then they actually become a core member of the team. So there's some great stories as well that happen in my teams. The virtual team eventually became a core team because they built a product that is actually nowhere, and then they eventually made a business case out of it, and then we have customers, and then they adapted, and that became a new business actually. So there's some great stories on that as well.
That's really interesting. So these virtual teams are really formed for a specific function usually, and then they work together as long as it's needed. And then if they love working together so much, then they go back to their original teams. And if they love it so much, then they end up working together. If I understand it correctly.
Yeah, that is correct. For example, I'll give you a specific example. So we're working on this generative AI, one of the virtual team that we formed because we don't have resources, because generative AI is a big thing, right? And we already know that hiring is very hard, right? And we we have to get our developer productivity up within Salesforce. So what do you do, right? So what we figured out is there's some passionate engineers in this area we identified, right, across our organization. And then we said, hey, can you start with 50% of your time, right? And people love, right? Even though they have other works to do, but sometimes this is my passionate project, right? This is a new area. It's exciting. There's a lot of engineers like-minded like that. So you bring in those like-minded people, even though you allocate only 50% to them, right? You just tell them, hey, you're empowered, but it's 50%. But they always, I don't know, they don't go by time or whatnot. They really love solving problems, coming together, right? As they come together and then figure out and say, oh, we have to build this infrastructure here. We need to build this GPUs here, and then we need to build ETL. Whatever it is, right? Nobody prescribes. That's what the empowerment happens when you bring the like-minded people and then give the right. But again, just want to make sure, just because empowering teams is not a substitute for not thinking, right? You still have to do the right things, in my opinion. Right culture, you just said, you still have to do the right product vision and strategy. You have to outline that to the team. And of course, you have to break it down and give it to them a more digestible chunk as well. So those needs to happen. And then once you have that happen at the high level, then the teams, whether it's virtual or the really fully dedicated team, does not matter, right? Everything works just fine the way designed in Agile Manifesto, as long as you do all the things on the left side right first. And then the right side is all taken care of. So that's how we found a virtual team. And then now that particular team has become 9-member team, right? We also have data scientists from various organizations we pulled. My engineers worked on it on the IDE plugin development. And then we also brought in some ETL and database architects to do some of the backend storage. That become the actual core team now. It's become 9-member core team because they love so much to working together, and they've shown some phenomenal improvements in terms of acceptance rate. Like 1 out of 4 lines that developer writes today is actually in the beta users. 1 out of 4 lines actually come from generative AI. So we are very proud of the outcome, and now they've become that team charter is to go and deliver for all languages that within Salesforce we do, and then eventually also widely market this product outside as well for developer productivity.
Wow. Very, very cool. So if you, because that sounds like engineers are very empowered because they get to work on things that they are actually interested in, and they don't have to be stuck with one project all the time. But how do you make sure that all these virtual teams are aligned with the greater mission and strategy? Because I mean, as far as I know, Salesforce has around like 80,000 people. So
Yes.
Besides, like time zone differences, I'm sure there are a lot of different challenges that might come up when you're forming these virtual teams. How do you keep them all aligned and making sure that they're all in line with the strategy that is coming from the top management?
Yeah, that's definitely always going to be an interesting challenge. But I think there is some few toolings we leverage to solve for. Empowerment is a key. I think we talked about, right? I think another important thing is empowerment is more powerful, and ownership is even more powerful. So when you form virtual teams, there is always a caveat, right? There are times engineers always feel, I'm part-timer here, so what's my stake here, right? So there is always this things happening. So that's where I think we offset some other times with ownership. So when I say ownership, means like, let's say we have across time zone teams, right? We have teams in India, we teams in US, different time zones within US as well. And then also we have a team in Canada and so on, right? One thing you will quickly realize, all these teams work together towards the same product, right? Same platform. So that means there's a lot of cross-pollination needs to happen before we say it's done, right? The DoD is, we all have to come together. The work has to integrate, right? So the way we manage this complexity in many ways, I mean, I'm pretty sure that industry leaders have figured out different form. But what worked within Salesforce, particularly within our infrastructure organization, is ownership, right? When we divide the work in, say, India or Canada, we don't cross-pollinate in a way where all engineers need to meet all the time, right? So first we need to identify and carve out what the ownership is. For example, if US team is planning to do all the design work, and then we want to do the first POC and then viability of the product. And once we identify this viable, then we basically carve out and say, okay, so in your team will do all the product governance. In other words, one element of the biggest chunk, which is good thing about giving a work such as, it's more of a strategic, right? Give a work such a way that there's a less communication overhead needed within different cross time zones. But they have a very carved out piece. They still need to do their own detailed design. They still need to come to a forum like what we call an architectural VAT forum, where all these teams come up with a design and then they present into the bigger principal architecture level VAT sessions, where the bigger architects will still see all these teams, how they're thinking, the interfaces and the scaling and resiliency and monitoring. All this aligns with our common patterns. That's kind of what we call DoD. And they are still empowered to deliver how they want to do it, but they want the what and what the patterns they need to compliant of. Those are all vetted out left side of the product development, not on the right side, right? So once you do all those hard work on the left side first, do this right, ownership and aligning on the architectural patterns, and continuously forum of scrums. We call it scrum of scrums, where we meet once a week cadence, or depends on the product criticality, maybe once in 2 weeks. We meet scrum of scrums. All the engineering scrum leads / engineering managers come into that forum and then talk about how their team doing towards a project goal, what challenges they have, what risks they have, and then there is a scrum of scrum. There's another lead, what we call engineering sponsor, who basically listens to all this stuff and then continually report to the upper leadership what is working, what not working, what project criticality or what critical path right now needs some unblocking and so on. Whether it could be funding or it could be resourcing, whatever, right? So that's how we operate, manage the time zone, the ownership, giving the clarity and aligning on the architectural patterns, right? And then making sure there's a gatekeeper who making sure that product vision is not compromised in any form and shape by all these teams actually operating independently and autonomously.
Cool. And this might be a little bit of an outside of our topic question, but it just came to my mind as you were discussing all these different time zones and product teams and forums. You've been with Salesforce for a while. How have you changed your way of work? Because we talked about culture in the beginning a lot, and I completely agree with you that Agile is really maybe a tool to realize the culture of delivering value to the customers. So how did your way of work change as a result of the pandemic, if at all?
Yeah, I think totally. Personally, I felt like after pandemic our productivity went up. That may be true for a lot of industry as well, because now as engineers, if you ask every engineers, right, I think honestly, if they ask, they all tell like, hey, pandemic is hard. I understand that. But they also learned that we don't need to be, I know it's a little bit of a challenging with Agile Manifesto, but they still believe that still meaningful one-on-one connection can be still made virtually as well. At the same time, they also empowered to balance their work life better, right? So that's why when Salesforce, when the pandemic hit, our productivity went up high. Our leaders acknowledged it. I think because of as I said, right, engineering found this perfect balance, right? And now they can work anywhere, still be same productive as ever before, but now they have this new power in doing other things that they cannot do before, right? Because they're always wasting the time in commuting and whatnot, right? So Salesforce, after pandemic, when it came out, also made sure that within at least our team of the organization, right, we still only ask engineers to come once in a week or even less, basically. And then the reason being that once in a week is not for, just you have to force to come on one day, anything like that. They left to the discretion of the teams to decide when they want to come. For example, we come during the sprint planning day, or we come in a team building activity or sort, right? Or there is a critical, important communication coming from the leadership on what's our next year plan or release planning days and so on, right? So only those handful of days will come in. But in my opinion, personally, that's working out very well for us. So in other words, the leadership is acknowledge the fact that engineering organization love this, and something works, let's not change it for the sake of changing because other industries wants to change, right? So that one way I feel like Salesforce again is being a role model and the leader, empowering engineers what is right for them. And when you do right for engineers, every good thing's going to happen after that, right? So that's one way I feel we are changing, and we are just a little bit kind of different from industry because we are focused on our culture and then maximizing our culture to solve for our customers, right? So that's one way I see Salesforce keeping intact and change. And second thing is, again, this concept of virtual teams is very hard to visualize if we have to talk about before pandemic, right? But now it makes a lot more logical sense. I have virtual teams sometimes coming from completely different team and no dynamics, right? I think what's all tying together is empowerment and passionate project that I want to deliver, right? So that concept itself is actually, I feel like after pandemic, it's shot up even more. I've seen people are adapting now a lot more than ever before. And also a few other things to supplement that also made this possible is we also started few other changes after pandemic is, at least in our organization, is we want to make sure, because the industry wants to go 5x, 10x, right? I recently also heard somebody, CEO of another bigger company, say that, he sent a memo to a company, I want to go 10x next year, or velocity. We need to go figure out how to do 10x. So that's a norm in which we're operating, right? So after pandemic, what happens is that kind of situation comes in where you have to go 10x. We need to make sure, I told multiple times, right? We cannot take Agile for granted and think that it'll solve for everything. What I mean by that is you still have to do all the hard work on the left side. Agile only comes on the right, which is the left side, in my opinion, is product managers, go talk to the customers, do the usability study, understand, observe them, and learn what are the hypotheses the customer biggest pain point is, right? So have that, and then have a product vision and strategy, and then figure out with the architects, how can we incrementally deliver, and then come up with a plan, read it out multiple times, iterate on the left side, right? And then involve engineering teams to start building. In other words, you may think this is like a waterfall. It's not, actually. Actually, it's a lot more thinking needs to go first. Because if you don't get this right, executing faster, 10x, is not going to do any good. It's going to even more crash and fast, right? And burn your customers faster by giving a crappy product that customer doesn't like, right? So it's very important that we balance both. So I just want to make sure that the pandemic is reinforced again, because we want to go 10x faster now after pandemic. We want to make sure these fundamental things are not compromised. And Salesforce is very particular about keeping that culture thing that made success, not compromising when you go even 10x faster in the coming years.
I love that. It sounds like Salesforce is very conscious about creating value for not just the customers, but also for the engineers. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Because Salesforce is actually one of the top employer of the choice for, I don't know how many years I heard. It's always there, right? Every year we won one of the top 10 employers, right, in the Bay Area. And then also in India, I think we are top 3 or 5, I don't know. That's not just by, it's not like you get it every year, right? You have to put constant effort as a company, right? Because employers' preferences change, right? As I said, right, in the 2 years back, employee all wants to go 100% remote, and then company and actually enable that, right? Now we're finding a need, like especially for the newcomers, it's a little bit difficult for them without FaceTime to emotionally connect, right? And then have the chemistry built, and then eventually they'll be more productive, right? So to do that, we have to have a forum to minimally meet, give the forum a voice for those new employees to be able to meet with the veteran employees to gel and able to understand, have a meaningful conversation, right? So that's where Salesforce actually balancing that by giving that opportunity to meet in the right opportunity. Not more, not less, but just enough, right? So that is, in my opinion, these are some conscious choice we are learning and making as employees' preferences change, right? So it's not. I know Agile is not all about product and business impact, right? It's also you need to have empowering teams, and only way you're going to do that is consistently listen to your employee as another data point into Agile, and then you continue churn. That's why retrospectives not about what can we improve to get 10x velocity. No, did I get burnout last time by doing that 10x, right? That means now you need to go and tweak your pace. it's because of not clarity in the product, or is the DOR is not clear to the team, or DOD was wrongly assumed. So whatever it is, right, continually learn. That's why I call data-driven development, right? The data could come from the form of employee, or the form of product, or in the form of partnering teams, right? Or from your management upper chain, right? So continually take this data and then see how do I make this clarity hashed out so that there's a predictable nature for the employees to continually deliver a great quality product. So that's how I feel like some of the things Salesforce becomes successful in doing this by listening in all the stakeholders and keep them balanced. And that's how we become most admired company and successful company that employee loves to work year after year.
Thanks. And going off of that, could you maybe share with us how your journey came to be from first starting to work at Salesforce? Because you come off as like a very much of an agile activist, if I can say that. Like you seem very enthusiastic about the topic, and perhaps that's not something that I picture when I think about, engineers or directors working at corporations that are as big as Salesforce.
Yeah, I think Salesforce is very, very flat structure, right? Even though we are 80,000 developers, but if you look at it very simply, right, we're a very flat organization. I'll just give you a very specific example how our culture is, right? Our EVP, right? Normally in bigger organizations, I don't know, I can't comment, but at least it's very, very difficult for them to understand some of the pain points of the low-level engineers, right? What is working, not working. But in Salesforce, forget about EVP for a second. Even our engineering leader, right, Srinithala Pagada, right? You will be amazed. When we started the public cloud journey, he sat for over a period of extended 1 year. It's not easy. It's a marathon. It's a multi-marathon run. Over the extended period of 1 year, he have a weekly forum where every organization leader will come and present their product, where they are currently, and what some of the challenges they need to solve before they go into public cloud, right? So he really listens to all problems so that he wants to understand, absorb what some of the pain points. Because it's easy for him to say, okay, next year we're going to be done with public cloud. Okay, we'll go to AWS next year, and then GCP the following year, and then we're done with the public cloud journey, right? It's easy for him to say, and then everybody can rally behind them. But the engineering leaders, in my opinion, the great engineering leaders are the one first understand the problem bottom up, right? And then they have a forum to bring this up continuously. So that's what I think he did initially. So went through all the pain points, understand where is the biggest bets he needs to make first. Big investments needs to make first, and then where comes second, and basically a steel thread of things. You can see the whole bigger problem itself he went through in agile fashion. So that's how I call the thinking in agile is very, very important. And then it starts from the top leader who has that much pressure, but he still takes time to go and understand every organization on a weekly basis over the period of 1 year, and starts from 8 o'clock, ends at 5 o'clock. He starts with the same energy of asking questions at 8 o'clock, and I seen him the same energy asking the questions at 5 o'clock. That shows me a great leadership at work, right? And we all, in my opinion, we all should learn as a leaders, right? It's very easy for you to say, okay, here's a what, here's a why, and then go deliver, right? But take some time to skip level, understand, right? Skip level meeting is a very powerful tool if you use it right. And that's exactly, I just want to use this as an example, right? How we should think agile on any problem that we want to put forward. Think it agile, iterate, learn, and then set the right expectations for all organizations.
Okay, we are slowly but surely approaching the end of our conversation, and I just want to summarize a couple things that really stuck with me from what you have shared with us. First of all, culture is the bottom line at an organization, and making sure that you deliver value to the customers through creating outcomes that are valuable for the customers is of utmost value in any organization. And maybe agile is just a tool in how to do that, and you have to be able to choose the right tools. But in a large organization, you make it seem like empowerment is actually doable, and also making sure that the entire organization is aligned with the values and the mission of the company is also something that leaders can do. And I would like to point to your last point where you said, the top management has to be able to pay attention and continuously pay attention to what is happening while people are delivering the product. What advice, apart from this or elaborating this, would you give to someone who is looking to improve their agile organization, or to someone who is maybe just thinking about introducing agile software delivery to their large organization? What should they do?
That's a great question. So my closing thought is very simple, right? Treat your organization as doctors, right? Who treating on patients means a business outcome they want to get, right? Of course, all the business outcome is you want patients to be healthy, and then if they need a surgery, they need to be recovering fast, right? So treat this doctors as an organization, right? And your patient as your customers, right? Agile is nothing but an operational procedure, right? There's many ways you can do this, right? But Agile is making sure you're doing the operation methodically and iteratively. That means you're diagnosing initially before you operate. You diagnosed the problem, and then you figure out various techniques, and finally you figure out, okay, operation is the best way to go, right? So you basically follow Agile iterative process as operation, right? So, but just because you have operation procedure, if you just follow, it's not like you're going to be successful, right? You still have, this is what I keep calling, you still have to do all the right things, right? You properly follow the diagnostics. Don't taking shortcuts. And if something is not clear, go redo it. It's okay, right? So the same principles is very important, right? So a lot of times I've seen people taking Agile for granted, and then they do this operation saying, oh, I'll literally follow Agile manifesto without thinking about culture, without thinking about empowerment, without thinking about some creative way of virtual teams as a first solution rather than forcing people to do more and creating burnouts and so on. So what ultimately this organizations, the dysfunctional organization I've seen is, operations succeeded. Because you know why? We did follow the Agile to the books. Guess what? Your patient died, right? So I just want to make sure, this happened many times I've seen in my older career, right? So operation successful patient died is actually a big anti-pattern, right? So we want to make sure our operation is successful, but that's not the first thing, right? You need to make sure you do all your legwork first, and then use this right operational methodology to get your patients get well, right? So that's my take home. If you're listening here, is just be pragmatic about it. Take Agile methodologies, modify based on your culture. If engineers are telling you to modify for empowerment, and also if there is lack of ownership causing churn, fix those things. Those subtle pragmatic things you have to do. And if you follow the Agile methodologies of Scrum and retrospective and feedbacks continuously, I feel like that is how your patient is going to be successful. And as an organizational doctor, you've done your job and you did the right tooling to get there.
I love that. Thank you. I hope that all of our patients will survive. Wow, cool. I love the analogy too. That's just like a heavy thing to wrap my head around. I loved our conversation today. We touched on a lot of things that I think are very valuable, and I can't help but come to the conclusion that it's really about the people, and you have to make sure that the people feel like they can do their best job. And if you give them space, then they will definitely do their best job. And you made it really sound like that Salesforce is such a place where a lot of engineers can thrive and get new challenges, and also go on to new projects while also working on their older projects and creating accomplishments for themselves. Is there anything else at all that you would like to add for our listeners? Any parting words or word of advice?
Yeah, I think the key there is to, again, as I said, right, continually be agile in thinking, right? What works this year may not work next year, right? Make as part of the process of collecting feedback, and then feedback can come from top or your partners or your even engineers telling you, right? Be open-minded about it, right? I think what important, in my opinion, Agile is there. It's ultimately the engineering. You got to build the Agile organization, and it starts from every leaders, right? First, adapt that mindset of Agile, right? As I give an example of our engineering officer was able to do that for a year. Yes, it's hard work, but what it enabled is to learn what is that needed from partners, what is needed from our external customers, and so on. So the key there is to continually have that open office of all these partners can come and give you the feedback, right? Our employees can give you the feedback, and aggregate that information, and then what it takes to write strategic call you can make is very important, and continually improve the process, right? And some of them means you need to be a little bit away from Agile Manifesto, some cases, right? The example of I gave you where understanding where the team person situation, and that's going to change how the velocity is going to be next quarter or so. So it's okay to be open-minded and adapt that and continually empower them, right? I think if you empower the team, all the Agile, whether it's Agile or non-Agile, right? Those are all secondary, right? I think the key there is to treat your patients right? Operation will automatically happen for sure because you follow the process right, and then your patients will be thriving as well. So it's very important to take the feedback loop and continually iterate and change your mindset based on the feedback and keep trying, right? And you'll definitely get the outcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mayakrishnan Chakkarapani was my guest today. Thank you so much for joining Level Up Engineering, Senior Director of Software Engineering at Salesforce. And we talked about how to implement Agile software development in huge companies like Salesforce. I think we have all learned a lot, and there's definitely hope in making sure that companies actually do Agile development. Where can our listeners follow your work online or anywhere?
Yeah, I think I usually post it in the LinkedIn and then YouTube. So all those links will post it in the LinkedIn channel that they follow.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining Level Up Engineering. I had a really fun time conversing with you. Dearest listeners and watchers, thanks for joining Level Up Engineering. I am Karolina Tóth, and I hope to see you next time.
Thanks for staying with us. This was the Level Up Engineering Podcast by Apex Lab. Check them out at apexlab.io. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, rate our content, and share your thoughts on this episode. See you next time.